Hi, this is Vanessa Gorman, and today's lesson is about additional Greek adjectives and pronouns, principally those that follow some form of the third declension, as well as the comparison of adjectives, which we haven't really talked about yet. Remember what you've already learned. Adjectives match the noun they modify in gender, number, and case, which does not necessarily mean they have the same endings as the nouns they modify. They can act attributively, which is to say right immediately after an article. They can be predicate, which is when they're not immediately after an article and they constitute a predicate nominative, or they can be substantive after an article but with no noun, and therefore they act as nouns. A true third declension adjective is something like tachos, which means swift. And you can see with the root tach, it follows the same pattern, right? It's as a upsilon stem third declension noun. The fact of the matter is, the only form you're going to see hardly at all is tahu, the neuter accusative singular, used adverbially, meaning quickly. So many of these adjectives are rarely seen as adjectives and mostly seen in one or two forms as adverbs. And this is one of those cases. Tahu is the most common by far that you'll ever see. So, for example, we have a sentence here. Echai, which you know from your earlier list means there. Detahu enikesa. Enikesa. Nikao is to conquer. We see the sigma, we see the augment, we know it's the aorist. Then we see the epsilon ending, we know it's the third person singular. Means so he conquered. He conquered there, tahu, quickly. And so that's all it means. He conquered there quickly. Likewise, we have a longer sentence. Hoide persai tahu. Dodeca men hippeas dudipos apektainan. Now, clearly right at the beginning we have a nominative, the Persians. That's fine. At the end we have a nice conjugated verb in the third person plural, apektainan. So we know where we're going now. The Persians are killing somebody. We see tahu. We think quickly. Who are they killing? Well, now we have a men-de construction. We have men hippeas and de hippus. Now, those words have the same stem, but if you'll remember, the second one, hippus, is a second declension, and it simply means horse, whereas the first one, hippeas, is a third declension, and it means a horseman, right? The third declension often includes any kinds of occupations. So the final things left in this sentence are numbers, 12 and 2. Dodeca, right, 2 plus 10, and duo, 2. So put it all together. The Persians killed horsemen and horses is the bare sentence. So we have horsemen and horses are object cos hanging on the de of the men de. The men is the aux y because it's the earlier part of the series. So the Persians killed how many horsemen? 12 of them. So that's an attribute. The number is an attribute of the object. 2 of the horses, that's an attribute of the object. And all of this is being done tahu, quickly. So that's hanging on the main verb because it's telling you in what manner they are killing. So it is a true adverb on the main verb. So the Persians quickly killed 12 horsemen and 2 horses. So that's the first piece I'm going to give you today. The second piece is I want to fill in those couple of numbers that we skipped earlier, which is to say 1, 3, and 4. The number 1 is heis. Now, don't confuse it with ice, the preposition into. The number 1 has a rough breathing and it has an accent, whereas the preposition into has neither, has a smooth breathing and no accent. So heis means 1, and it's declined a little oddly, and we're going to see a few of these words like this. It, in the feminine, has a different root, mia, and it's declined like a plain old first declension feminine. But in the masculine and the nominative or neuter, it has this root hen, and it declines like a third declension. So we have these mixed declension adjectives slash pronouns. I usually label heis as an adjective. Hudais, however, which is literally ook ice, right? No one. You see all the time. It's so often that it's combined into one word. And again, you'll see this quite a lot. Now, the feminines don't show up that much because we don't talk about feminines so much. But you'll see the masculine forms, you'll see the neuter forms. You'll especially see uden, the neuter accusative singular. And notice we only have singulars because you can't have more than one. So uden is a very common, especially it can be used adverbially to mean not at all. So it's one of these adverbial accusatives. 3 and 4 are also more third declension. 4 doesn't show up very often, so don't sweat it. 3 shows up fairly often. It's on one of our frequent word lists. Declined like a third declension, no singular, because you can't have a singular 3. Okay? The word for, teteros in Attic, tesseros in the rest of Greek. You'll see it both ways. So, for example, here's a sentence. Pola heis hekastos ton lithon pragmata par eiche. Now, there's a couple of words in there you don't know. If you look at the verb par eiche, you know that comes from echo. But you don't know what par echo means necessarily. If you look it up with your analyzer, par echo usually means something like furnish. To have alongside you is to supply something, okay? So we have par eche in the aorist third person singular. Now, we want to find a third person singular subject. Well, we see the word one, heis. So there you go. There's our subject. We also see the word hekastos. Now, that's a natural combination, each one, right? So our subject here is each one. Each one offered. Now, when you get something like one or each one, you often have with it a partitive genitive. You kind of expect a partitive genitive. Unless it's clear from context, we got to explain each one of what. So you look for your genitive and you see ton lithon. So you know that's the partitive genitive. You don't know what it means. Well, it's cognate with the word lithography, and it simply means rock or stone. So each one of the stones furnished pragmata. Pragmata is matters or stuff, but it also is problems. So each one furnished problems. And then finally we have this word pola left at the beginning. Maybe it's an adverbial accusative, but then it would normally be in the singular, not the plural neuter. Far more likely it's just an adjective that's been separated from the noun it modifies, which they will do sometimes, especially by putting it at the front of the sentence to emphasize the word. The first word of the sentence is especially emphasized. The last word of the sentence is especially emphasized. So they're furnishing many problems, and this is just a subtle way of emphasizing the many. So each one of the rocks offered many problems. This is a situation where the army that's uphill started rolling rocks down on the army that was downhill. All right, uden garmen alo cajon epoesen ente pole. So find your verb, epoesen, and you recognize the sigma and the augment. You know it's an aorist. You see the epsilon ending. You know it's third person singular. He made, he did. Then it's followed by a simple prepositional phrase, in the city. That's going to be place where. That's not a problem. Gar is always your sentence adverb. There's nothing else for it to be. Men, probably also a sentence adverb. I'd guess the next sentence is going to begin with a de. Then we have uden alo chachon. We know chachon means bad. Alo means other. And uden is not one. So no other evil. So if it's neuter, which it has to be, right? Alo can only be neuter. Uden can only be neuter. Kakon has some choices. No other evil. If it were the subject of the sentence, we would have no other evil did in the city. Well, evil doesn't usually act. It's not one of those things. Instead, what we probably have is assume the subject from the verb. He did no other evil in the city. So for he did no other evil in the city, the for gives you a little bit of force of the gar, if you want to put it in there. And there's also a sense of a contrast coming with the men, but you can add that when you get to the de. So we see nothing is the object. Alo chachon are attributes of that object. In the city is a place where. Men and gar are aux wise, and your main verb, of course. So here's another one. Kai tas samion deca, kai tas ton now archon, trice elipon. Trace, elipen. Elipon is your verb, obviously, and we know that from lepo, to leave. We know that the vowel in the stem has changed, so it's an aorist. It's an on ending, so it's they. So it's a third person plural aorist. They left. Okay. Who left? Do we have any nominatives in the sentence? I don't see any. But we have the possibility of the numbers because deca is not declinable. Trace could be either nominative or accusative. But let's assume that the numbers aren't the subject and let's treat them as the object. Well, what do we have that's in an accusative case? We have tas. Tas, samion deca kai tas ton now archon tres. We don't have any feminine accusative plural nouns. So the things, let's just leave it at that. We have some feminine things. And note that these are feminine articles. What you see too is they're being conjoined with samion and ton now archon. You know those are genitives. So the tas, it's not the samians and the nauarchs. It's something of the samians and something of the nauarchs. And what would it be? Well, the 10 of the samians and the 3 of the nauarchs. And what are the 10 and the 3? There's something feminine and plural. That's all we know. From context, you would know they're talking about ships. The word nous is feminine. And so what they haven't bothered to put in is the word ships because it's been said so many times in the context, you don't need it again. But you can see from the article, this is why the article is so important for you. You can see from the article that something feminine is the object of the elipon. So what you have is they left, and they left 10 and 3. 10 of the Samian ships and 3 of the ships owned by the nauarchs. 3 of the nauarch ships. So you see how you have to assume nouns out of articles when you need to, just as you have to assume them out of verbs when you need to. So you get pronouns out of them. Okay, so the number 3 is going to occur fairly often. It's not going to give you much trouble because we're used to tripods and triangles and things like that. There's another word that's quite common in Greek, and that's all, every, or the whole. And this is the word pas or pantos. Pas pantos. Hapas is just a stronger version of pas. It's the same word otherwise. You just stick an alpha on the front. Pas, pantos, panti, panta, right? If you look at the feminine, pasa, pases, passe, pasan, it's a plain old first declension feminine, right? It's no problem there. If you look at the masculine and the neuter, you get a third declension. So this is another one of these mixed declension adjectives built on 2 stems. The feminine has a different stem than the masculine and the neuter. Very, very common. It occurs everywhere. It's, you know, if we talk about a pan-Athenaic festival, it's a festival that is celebrated all throughout Hellas, right? Pan-Athenaic is throughout Athens. Pan-Hellenic, like the Olympic Games, is celebrated all throughout Hellas. So pan, you know, is just this word everywhere, right? So here's an example. Pasai gar tote hypolise to dii ethuon. So we have somebody sacrificing, ethuon. We see the epsilon, we see the on, there's no sigma, so it's in the imperfect, third person plural. They were sacrificing. What do we have in the nominative? Well, we have the cities, hai polis. But it's not just the cities, it is passai hai polis, all the cities. And so all is just acting as a plain old adjective attribute here. And you sacrifice to someone in the dative, to de, which is, as you'll remember, Zeus. So for all the cities, sacrifice to Zeus then. Tota just means then. It's just the adverb. All right, here's another one. Hylon de tote pantes ton Lysandron strategon. Okay, we see tota again. So we have another then. And we have the verb right up front, hylon, which comes from, if you'll remember, hyreo. It's the aorist stem from hyreo, which is a little odd. So on gives you a second aorist, third person plural. They took is the basic meaning, but another meaning of hyreo that's very common is to choose. In a sentence like this, there's pretty gray area between the two. So pantes, we know that's the nominative plural all men in the masculine. Ton Lysandron, that's a nice accusative. So all the men took Lysander or chose Lysander. And the reason I'm going to opt for chose is because then we have this word strategon. Now, if it had been ton Lysandron, ton strategon, and that word had been attributive, it would be all men took Lysander the general. But because it's not attributive, they took Lysander as their general. And remember, this is what we call an object complement, when you make someone something, both in the accusative. So they made Lysander their general, essentially, by choosing him as general. So you could say everybody took Lysander as their general, but that's another way of saying they chose him as their general. So all men, pantes here is acting as a pronoun, right? It's acting in place of the noun. There is no article anywhere to be seen. It doesn't need one. Chose Lysander to be their general. Ocamp, the general, Lysander is the object, all men is the subject, tota is just an adverb. All right. Haineas, hapasai, eis parion, hex kai ogdoe conta tes nuktos except pleusan. Now, hex is not x. Same thing as with heis and ice. Hex, with the breathing and the accent, is 6. Okay, so we've got right up front the ships, and we have right up front all the ships. And then if you go on to the verb, we see the sigma, we see the augment after the prefix, and we know it's an aorist. We see the son, we know it's third person plural. Pleuo means to sail. They sailed out. So they sailed out. The ships sailed out. There's your basic sentence. The ships sailed out. Now, where are they sailing? Eis parion, into parion. Now, the verb has out of, and so the object would be out of someplace. And therefore, into someplace is actually acting adverbially in this sentence, even though it's the place to which. 6 and 80. Both of these are non-declinable, so they're always going to be the same form. So we don't know what they're attached to yet. Tes nuktos, we have a genitive phrase, and it refers to the nuktos is night, so it's a time phrase, so genitive of time is generally within which. So all of the ships sailed out during the night to Parion, or Parios, I guess it is. No, it's Parion. What do you do with 86? There's nothing else that's plural in this sentence, so it has to be the ships. So we would say all 86 ships sailed away at night to Parion. See how you can pile up attributes like that, all 86 of them. Passes de tes helados prespes esan. Okay, passes you see right away. Passes tes Helados is a phrase. Hellas is the word Greece in the feminine. And so tes helados makes sense, and we have pases in front of it. Presbes is the nominative plural of presbus, meaning old men or messengers. And then we have eson, the verb to be, in the imperfect. So the messengers were, or they were the messengers, one or the other. We don't have another nominative, so there's no predicate nominative. So I'm going to opt for they were the messengers. Pases, in this case, they were the messengers of Greece. That makes sense. The messengers of something makes sense. It's describing what the messengers are. Sort of kind of a source, genitive source, you might say, in a way, but it's actually just a plain old possessive, right? Greece's messengers. What do you do with pases? They're the messengers of all Greece, or you could say of the whole of Greece, the entirety of Greece. When pases shows up in the singular, it usually means the whole or all of. So they were the messengers of all Greece. Eichegar tein horan hapasan. So he held the land is your basic sentence, right? For he held the land. Which land? All of it. He held the entire land, right? So we could say all of the land, or just say simply the entire land. Don't get stuck on literal translations when they don't produce idiomatic English. All right. Tis, some, a certain. Tis is a word that shows up quite a lot, and you can see right away it has no accent on it. It's what we call an enclitic. And it's a third declension. It has the same form in the masculine and feminine, and then a different form in the neuter in the accusative and masculine, or nominative and accusative, like you'd expect. And this just means someone, anyone, something, a certain somebody. If you wanted to say a certain man came to visit, you could say tis on air. And in the neuter singular accusative, it shows up adverbially quite a lot, and it just sort of means somehow. It's just a vague kind of adverb thrown in there. So let me give you a few examples. Tis lakedemonion apos tes poleos sun dunamai apegagen. So tis lakedemonion. Lakedemonion is genitive. So we get, not unusually, a partitive genitive with the word tis. Just like if I had said one of the Lacedaemonians, you can say someone of the Lacedaemonians, tis. From the city, apo tes poleos, sun duname, remember duname is dynamite, so power, with power, led out. So someone led them out. You have to kind of assume the object. They don't bother stating it here. Led them out of the city in force is how we would say it in English, right? The ramenes deti tout ephobe. So we have Theramenes in the nominative. We've seen him plenty times. Theramenes ephobe was fearing, right? Just plain old imperfect. Deti tauta. So he could be fearing T something. But then what do you do with tauta? That's hard to know. On the other hand, he could be fearing tauta, these things. And then T is just stuck in there. This happens so often you just get used to it. It's just stuck in there to mean sort of somehow. Theramenes was somehow afraid of these things, or Theramenes was fearing these things, quite literally. Dad just being the sentence adverb. So T just becomes the adverb somehow. And tauta is your direct object in the accusative neuter plural. Metadetauta. We've seen that a few times. Herodas tis Syracusios en Phoenike ein meta presbeus tinos. Okay, metadetauta, we've seen that so many times afterwards. Herodas is a man's name in the nominative. But then we also have this nominative tis, and we have this nominative Syracosios. Syracosios is an ethnic that can be either a noun or an adjective, meaning a Syracusan. And tis in between, some Syracusan. So this phrase altogether is telling us there's this guy Herodas who happens to be a Syracusan. That's kind of their way of saying a certain Syracusan named Herodas. En Phoenike in Phoenicia, ein was meta presbeus tinos, with an ambassador, tinos, some ambassador. Now, it's usually enclitic, but since no word follows it, it has to take an accent because it's the end of the sentence. So this whole thing together, afterwards, a certain Syracusan named Herodas, or Herodas, some Syracusan, was in Phoenicia with some envoy. Now, part of this, one element of the sentence has to be the predicate nominative, even though nothing's nominative. That doesn't stop you. I've chosen in Phoenicia. What is the point that's being stressed with the sentence? Is it that Herodas was with the envoy? Or was it that Herodas was some Syracusan? Or is it Herodas was in Phoenicia? I think that's probably the stronger choice. And so I made in Phoenike the pronoun, and the meta presbeus tinos I made an adverb. We also have more mixed declensions, also built on two stems, but these are easier. These are much easier because they mostly look like three-ending adjectives. The only exception are the ones that occur most often, of course. And these are words that don't give you trouble because poly is a word we see all the time in English. Polygamous, polytonic, you know, any word with poly in it. Polygon means many or much. Much in the singular, many in the plural. Megos, again, we see it in English all the time. Megatron, megaplex. It just means something large or great. With polus, you get the upsilon stem in the nominative and accusative singular. So polus, polun, polu, polu. And frankly, polu is probably the most common form because, again, we get these adverbial accusatives. The rest, they double the L, and they decline just like a three-declension adjective. They are not confusing in one bit. Megos is kind of the same thing. It gets this megal as the stem for the vast majority of it, and the majority of it is declined like a three-ending adjective. Megos, megon, mega, mega. And mega is going to be the form you see the most. So again, these don't cause trouble, right? These don't cause trouble at all. Give you a couple of examples here. Metadetauta, u polais, hemerais, husteron, elthen, athenon, sorry, I always have this name stumble. Thumocares. I keep wanting to say something else for him. So metadetauta afterwards. Thumocares came from Athens. So far, we've seen the sentence before, right? He came later from Athens. We've seen that before. Now we've just added the phrase upolais hemerais. Later is begging for something called the dative of degree difference. You can take a comparison like later, and you can pair it up with a dative to mean by how much, dative of degree difference. In this case, it's later by days, by many days, by not many days. So later, adverb, by days, adverb, not many. So that's what you get. Afterwards, not many days later, Thumocares came from Athens. We see that kind of a construction all the time, and it's pretty expected. Kai poloi, chalepos, emachonta, hippion. Okay, so, and many, poloi. We see the oi, we know it's a nominative, masculine, plural, many men. Chalepos, we have that Omicron sigma ending of an adverb. Difficult is what chalepos means, so with difficulty. They fought, or they were fighting, sorry. Hippeon, that has the Omicron nu, you know that's going to be a genitive plural. And it's third declension because we have that epsilon in there. So of the horsemen. So put it together. And many of the horsemen were fighting with difficulty. Many of the horsemen again, many is one of these number words that wants a genitive to tell you many what. So another example, alapoles echon megalos. So here's the word mega, right, with poles. And again, it's got the alpha sigma ending, plain old first declension. So we know echon they had many cities. They held great cities. Megala is that sense of big and great. So, but they held many cities. Very straightforward. Likewise, here's another example. Au and megala kinduno ein. Now, you've not had kindunos, but you can look at it and say, okay, we have the word ein, so it's a copular verb. So he was. Au means again. In megala, in great. So he was in great something. Now, in great kundunos, whatever the hell kundunos means. So you look up kundunos and you see it says danger. So he was in great danger. And so in great danger becomes the predicate nominative after the copular verb, and the au is an adverb. So he was, again, in great danger. So I'm giving you in this chapter 12 words. It's not so bad. Most of them are very recognizable. They don't give you much trouble. I've talked about all but 2 of them now. I haven't talked about elason or kratistos yet, and I'm going to do that in the next video. But these are all words that occur very frequently. They especially occur as adverbs, but they also many of them act as pronouns like tis or udes. You see by the numbers that they're very, very common. And so many of these are really worth being very familiar with. And I've given you a lot of sentences to practice in this chapter. I'm going to go on and give you a separate video about comparatives and superlatives now.